Good afternoon, Trump's family. Welcome back to my channel. Have a nice weekend, everyone, and God bless you. Let's get into the news. And it's a big news coming out of Michigan's race for the governor over there. Gretchen Whitmer versus Tudor Dixon, as that race is starting to heat up even more. Looks like Gretchen Whitmer is losing the edge that she had earlier on in this midterm election. As we approach the midterms, which are 24 days away, we continue to get closer and closer, and people in Michigan are going to have to make a choice. Do they are going to want to continue to live under the restrictions that Gretchen Whitmer did? Our days okay, with the tens of thousands of seniors that were forced to be in nursing homes with COVID patients wait its way under report it less so than it was for New York and Pennsylvania. By Gretchen Whitmer actually had more seniors die in these nursing homes than New York and Pennsylvania. And yet, the media has turned a blind eye to it. This is a huge story, of course, that needs to continue to be reported on, needs to continue to be told to other people there in the state. I'm sure two people in Michigan know a lot of this stuff already. So as we are approaching the midterms that we're approaching November 8th, it looks like Tudor Dixon has made up a lot of ground. And that is looking good for the Republican Party in the state of Michigan. So let's go and take a look at here. And it just gives us a good highlight of what's going on over there in Michigan right now. From political polls, Michigan governor by Insider, advanced poll winners at 44 and Dixon's at 44 as well. It's a tie. They're a dead heat right now. You have a couple here for Logan, 2%, and Bootsma for 3%. So of course this is going to come down to the wire. It's going to take every single person who's in Michigan to vote on election day. Get out, overwhelm the polls by being there to vote in person. Don't sit there and think you're going melee and then on this one, go to the polls. Go to the polls if you're able to. Take your friend, take your family member, take whomever you're able to. Go vote for Tudor Dixon. Even though I have my gripes about Dixon, she's way worse. Or excuse me, she's way better. Excuse me, way better than Gretchen Whitmer, which is she's terrible. Tudor Dixon also kicked Gretchen's butt in the debate. She says we need to get our kids back into reading, back to the basics right now in Michigan schools. As you see on the news, parents are really concerned about what their kids are being taught with the sex and gender theory and not teaching them to read, write, and do math. We've made it very clear. We want parents involved in child's education. And we want them to go back to the basics, making sure our kids know how to read, write, and do math from kindergarten to third grade. They're learning to read from the third grade on. They're learning to their reading to learn. If there's missing that crucial step, we are robbing them, Tudor Dixon said. So here's that piece. Everyone listen to this. 2.5 years ago, what do you think you would have done differently if you were governor? Well, the governor wants you to believe that she did listen to the experts. But we have the letter from the Nursing Home Association that said whatever you do, don't send COVID-positive patients into nursing homes. And yet the governor did. When Andrew Cuomo even backed off of this, Governor Whitmer doubled down. She even tried to hide the final report of the numbers of how many deaths we had. In fact, she's tried to hide a lot from this pandemic. She tried to hide, or she did hide effectively, why her Department of Health and Human Services director left. In fact, she even paid them off with a secrecy agreement. The same with unemployment. What a debacle to have $8.5 billion fraudulently sent out. Now I've got people bringing bills from the state up to me, begging me to forgive the unemployment that she's trying to get out back, because she accidentally sent $8.5 billion out. What about our students that she kept locked out of schools, and wouldn't listen to parents when they begged her to let them play? Let them play. She wouldn't even listen. Okay. Tudor Dixon brought up a lot of great points there in that debate. And of course, great Gretchen Whitmer couldn't answer any of them without, of course, giving excuses and everything else like that, and what most Democrats have continued to do, just as a rare moment in a debate, because as we know, most Democrats have been hiding. They are hiding from Biden's record data, won't be called out on supporting Biden, because they know the tremendous disaster that regime has been to this country, how people are suffering and how people are having a hard time with bills and being able to put food on the table, and put gas in their cars, and yet they continue to double and triple down on the same policies that have got us where we currently it currently gotten us to where we are right now. So are you in Michigan? Are you heading out to vote? Let me know how it's looking on the ground where you guys are at. And some significant news, the left, nothing ever ages well with this administration, because this administration is almost never telling the truth. If you're going to constantly lie and constantly cope well, then you're gonna get constantly caught out. That is just the reality of the situation. And that's why I was so confident in the video that I posted yesterday. The Joe Biden statements on the economy wouldn't age. Well, and would you look at that, it seems as though the CPI reading was exactly what I predicted. I mean, literally exactly the numbers that I said it would be. I said, most likely that CPI would hover around the same as it was last month. It was identical, dropping only 0.1%. And I also said that core CPI and service costs would go up. Core CPI is still trending upwards. Last month, core CPI was an incredibly bearish number, or the reading we just got for September was even worse. And so Joe Biden again looks like a fool. And it's very simply because he's a liar. It's not like I'm some sort of genius who's able to predict the future of the economy. It's just that I'm looking at things honestly, with a real understanding or an acceptance of basic reality and what's happening with costs. And Joe Biden is pushing straight up copian propaganda and is just refusing to accept the basic realities. That is the fundamental difference. And man, it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse for Sleepy Joe and his ridiculous administration, as the truth comes to surface as all of his lies continue to backfire and expose him for the dishonest lying hack that is. And once again, we have a couple of statements here. We have a couple of stances from the administration that really aren't aging. Well, we're going to start off with Saudi Arabia, because the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia continues to set the record straight and embarrass him. You know, I'm not a fan of this. I'm not a fan of constantly pointing out that Saudi Arabia is correct. But the simple fact of the matter is that they are in these cases in this situation, and it's Joe Biden who continues to act completely ridiculous. Right, folks. Everyone listen to this. Let's get straight where I went. I didn't go to one about oil. I went about making sure that we made sure that we weren't going to walk away from the Middle East. Okay, Joe Biden claims that he never went to the Saudis to beg them for oil. It wasn't even about oil. Joe Biden says, and instantly, Joe Biden gets absolutely wrecked as the Saudis correct the record again. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia just released this public statement. An official at the Foreign Ministry in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia stated that the government of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has viewed the statements issued about the kingdom following the OPEC Plus decision announced on October 5, 2022, which have described the decision as the kingdom taking sides in international conflict and that it was politically motivated against the United States of America. The government of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia would first like to express its total rejection of these statements that are not based on facts and which are based on portraying the OPEC Plus decision out of its purely economic context. This decision was taken unanimously by all member states of the OPEC group. The kingdom affirms that the outcomes of the OPEC Plus meetings are adopted through consensus among member states and that they are not based on the unilateral decision by a single country. The outcomes are purely based on economic considerations that take into account maintaining balance of supply and demand in the oil markets as well as aim to limit volatility that does not serve the interest of consumers and producers, as has always been the case within OPEC. Plus, the OPEC Plus group makes its decisions independently in accordance with established independent practices, followed by the international organizations. The government of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia would also like to clarify that based on its belief in the importance of dialogue and exchange of views with its allies and partners outside the OPEC Plus group regarding the situation in the oil markets, the government of the kingdom clarified through its continuous consultation with the U.S. administration that all economic analyses indicate that postponing the OPEC Plus decision for a month, according to what has been suggested, would have had negative economic consequences. And that right there is the smoking gun. Well, it's clearly a little bit vague. They're not taking a direct shot. What they're saying there is that Joe Biden's administration wanted them to postpone this decision by a month, conveniently right after the midterms, and they told Joe to take a hike. This is why we were seeing reports that people in the White House were livid. We were hearing reports of people being pissed in the White House after the OPEC Plus decision, because as the Saudis are now saying, Joe Biden's administration was clearly the group that was trying to politicize this situation. Once again, it shows how stupid the brand and regime really is. He's putting his political future in the hands of the Saudis and expecting them to make decisions in his best interest. How dumb do you have to be for this to be your approach when it comes to foreign policy? The Saudis are considered allies. Sure. I mean, of course, that topic is debatable, but it's hard to say that they're our friends and they're certainly not our family. You know, extremely close friends and relatives, you expect them to take a little bit of sacrifice to benefit you, to help you. The Saudis are, if anything, our adversary. The United States is the biggest oil producer on the planet, producing 18 million barrels of oil a day. And of course, those 18 million barrels of oil aren't enough to meet domestic needs. Therefore, the United States is dependent on the Saudis. And of course, even the Russians and even Canada. It's like I keep repeating. I mean, I've said it a million times. But Joe Biden has given up all of his leverage. He's played into his adversaries' hands, and now he's confused, and he's angry when they don't bend over backwards for him. Joe, you're stupid, plain and simple. I don't get what this guy is doing. He takes it to a whole other level. Now, with his diplomacy, or his lack of diplomacy, his response to screwing up this whole situation with the Saudis is to attack the Saudis. What are you doing, men, going to Saudi Arabia to beg them to pump more oil or to beg them to not make this decision until after the midterms, which they clearly and unequivocally state never happened, and then turning around and saying that they're making their decision based on us electoral politics, when that's what you're doing? How to ruin a relationship. 101. And this is the second time the Saudis dunk on him. It's a total disgrace. It's a global embarrassment. And it shows Joe Biden's absolute incompetence on the world stage. This guy is the biggest clown out there, and foreign leaders, foreign nations are running circles around him, laughing at him and making him look like a complete fool over and over and over again. But man, we've got to move away from the Saudi thing, as frustrating as it is, and I always go on rants every time I mentioned it. There's another Joe Biden statement. And Joe Biden says that isn't aging very well, or Biden regime stance. Remember when they kept telling us that inflation is not a big deal, and it's just transitory, something that will settle down, transitory? Well, we just got the September CPI reading and inflation hit at 8.1%. And that's what the reduction in oil prices during the month of September, which Joe Biden kept taking victory laps over. Of course, since the OPEC decision in early October, it's spiking once again. But inflation is still not transitory, it's still consistently high at over 8%. And core CPI beat expectations at 6.6%. Meaning the cost of everything else, goods, services, literally everything that is in energy, and the cost of food. A big driver for last month's CPI increase was actually rent costs, meaning rents across America are now starting to rise in respect to the interest rates. And so the inflation crisis continues. It seems as though Joe Biden's Inflation Reduction Act didn't work like he thought it would. Who would have seen that one coming? And just to wrap up this video, the conclusion of this video is that Joe Biden is a horrible, disingenuous lying hack, was just saying things and just playing politics. And that's why, in a very unstable and volatile time like today, where things are expected to be relatively negative across the board, all of the statements aren't aging well, and Biden continues to look like a monumental liar. And I forgot to mention this earlier. So I might as well at the end. Joe Biden pointed at the Saudis and claimed that they're just playing politics with their decision on the oil markets, as Joe Biden himself continues to release oil from the strategic oil reserves, which, by the way, the strategic petroleum reserves just hit its lowest level since I think the 1970s. And he's doing this irresponsibly, to affect oil prices ahead of the midterms to benefit himself politically, going into the next election. Oil reserves, which are supposed to be used in emergency cases, only he's using for political and electoral gain, as he accuses others of playing politics with oil production. I can't stand this guy. Everything he does bothers me, and it's because everything that he does is politically motivated and disingenuous. And if you're paying attention, that fact is incredibly obvious. Thank you very much. WWG1WGA. Give me your thoughts below.